I'm Connor Old, and welcome back to another episode of Old's Oscar Countdown. And this week, we are going to be breaking down the Best Lead Actor category and my predictions as to what I think will get nominated. But if you're new to the series, what I do every single week is break down a different category for the 2022 Oscar nominations and talk about what I think will get nominated, as well as some possible contenders. Of course, this is ultimately the award season sort of central episode and central place as to where you can get your information and news and knowledge and accurate predictions. I mean, we've been doing this now for 5 years, of which we have an established track record of high percentage in terms of Gold Derby, in terms of accuracy, ultimately in terms of what's going to get nominated, what terms of wins. So this is a trusted source that you can rely on. And stay tuned and subscribe to the channel so you sort of follow us along this Oscar journey that sort of feels like more of a proper one this year as compared to last year. So it should be a lot of fun. Already we're seeing a bunch of changes, of which we're going to talk a little bit about and just sort of break down the category here in this episode. So starting off with my first slot, I'm going to give it to Will Smith for King Richard. I think he is the frontrunner right now, not only to get nominated, but to win, despite the sort of unsureness of him only being nominated once, of him never winning, of him trying and failing in many instances, and 7 pounds and Collateral Beauty and Concussion and whatnot. Will Smith is an intriguing guy because for a guy who's planned out his career so, intently in the first part of his life, and then to sort of try to get the Oscar stuff and then ultimately fail at that. And now he's sort of gone back to the more popular stuff with Bad Boys and Aladdin, and now he seems to sort of be getting the attention. It's weird how it works, but the truth is Will Smith is a charismatic figure. And if he wants this Oscar, I think this is the movie that he can win for. Playing Richard Williams, the father of Serena and Venus Williams, the tennis players. It's a long movie, but it's very much a crowd-pleasing movie. It's a biopic, which is the type of movie that the Academy loves to reward in terms of Best Picture, but also loves to reward actors who are playing real-life people. I mean, we saw Renee Zellweger for Judy. We saw Rami Malek for Freddie Mercury. We saw Daniel Kaluuya win last year. So there's a lot of instances in which actors playing real-life people often gets rewarded. There's a long history of that at the Oscars. And I think this is Will Smith's probably best chance he's had in a long time with a crowd-pleasing movie that I think will get nominated for Best Picture. It's just a matter of fact of, does he really want it? He's shooting a movie right now, Emancipation, with Antoine Fuqua, so he's not necessarily going to be campaigning, particularly in this early portion, but I do think once Oscars really do come around, Will Smith will be a guy who's so charming, who's so magnetic, that ultimately we're going to wonder why we hadn't given this Oscar to him in the first place. But he's not a guaranteed lock, because the guy in my second place, Benedict Cumberbatch for The Power of the Dog, I think is a real contender. And this is the Jane Campion movie, which I talked about on last week's episode, which I think could win Best Picture. I think will be a heavy nominated movie. And Jane Campion, the last sort of big Oscar movie that she did was The Piano, in which Anna Paquin and Holly Hunter both won acting awards. So Jane Campion's movies are known for sort of delivering great performances. I mean, as a matter of fact, I could see a scenario where 4 nominations come from this movie just from the acting categories. 2 from supporting actor, 1 from supporting actress, and then 1 here for Benedict Cumberbatch for lead actor. But the success of the movie, I also think, really relies on him. So if you like the movie, you most likely like Benedict Cumberbatch. As a character himself, he plays the cattle rancher Phil, who's very sort of domineering and intense in the first part of the movie, but as the movie sort of unfolds, we get to know a different kind of a side to him. So it's a complex character, but it's also a very fascinating and interesting character, a type of character that they've rewarded in the past. And Benedict Cumberbatch is also, like Will Smith, a very charming person and can sort of work a room too. So he can sort of campaign for himself if he really wants it, and does seem to be a little bit more of the prestige-y kind of a pick versus Will Smith is a little bit more of the populist movie star type of a pick. And oftentimes the Academy, for better or for worse, usually goes for that prestige-y kind of a pick, which would be more like a Benedict Cumberbatch. In third place right now, I have Denzel Washington for The Tragedy of Macbeth. This is a movie that I think in general will resonate, but regardless of if the movie resonates for picture or director or whatnot, what will resonate is the acting. This is a movie based on Macbeth. Denzel Washington plays Macbeth. That's a role that literally almost all actors wish they could have at some point. So I expect a huge support from the acting branch, SAG nominations, things like that, which of course helps in the scenario because the actors vote on who should get nominated for Best Acting. So Denzel Washington is a well-respected actor, has won twice, has been nominated many times, and in a movie that I think will be sort of heavily campaigned and do well in terms of all the other categories, Denzel not only has a chance to get nominated here, I think has a chance to win. So a well-liked person in a movie that I expect to be very well-liked, in a role that literally all actors wish they would have done, as a juicy, meaty role and complex role, and it's Shakespearean, and Denzel sort of started with that, and now in the later part of his career sort of ending with that, so it's an interesting kind of dilemma. Of course, once again, another very charming person that can work a room, so Denzel, if he really wants it, could get that third Oscar, but I think what's most likely is that nomination. Then in my fourth place, I went with Peter Dinklage in Cyrano. This is Joe Wright's latest movie, and Joe Wright has done very well in the Oscars in the past, winning, Gary Oldman for his lead acting win in Darkest Hour. Of course, also getting a Best Picture nomination. We've seen him do well with Atonement and Anna Karenina and even Hannah. So he's a filmmaker, Pride and Prejudice, who has done very well at the Oscars. This is a movie that premiered at Telluride to a positive response, but particularly with Peter Dinklage. And every year there's sort of one performance in each of the acting categories from a movie that necessarily isn't a huge hit. We've seen it with Denzel Washington, with Rowan J. Israel Esquire, where it's like, he's the only nomination from that movie. We've seen it with Viggo Mortensen in Captain Fantastic. Last year, Antonio Banderas with Pain and Glory. A movie that doesn't have a whole lot of nominations, but the actor's so well liked that they get the nomination. I think Peter Dinklage is that kind of an actor. Of course, mostly doing a lot of his prestige work in television with Game of Thrones, but now that's done, he's sort of transitioning, hopefully, into the movie side. And I think with this nomination, he will sort of get that level of respect. Of course, he's an incredible actor doing a great job in this movie. That was sort of the telltale sign of a lot of people when they watched the movie. It was like, the movie is maybe a little bit hit or miss. It's a little bit divided. Some people really do love it, but the big reason I think that everyone agrees on is that Peter Dinklage is an amazing actor, and he's amazing in this movie. Sings, of course, Cyrano de Bergerac is a play that's been adapted many times, so similarly to the Denzel Washington Macbeth connection, I think a lot of the actors will really see what he's doing with Cyrano and his interpretation, and they've always really wanted to play that character because it's such an interesting kind of complex duality kind of a character. So I think that Peter Dinklage, supposedly, I haven't seen the movie, but it's a very well-liked movie, but also the actual performance itself is so well-liked, so I think it will actually just sort of get over just from the fact that Peter Dinklage is so terrific in this movie, and Peter Dinklage is a well-respected actor. A plus B equals C. Then in my fifth slot, I've gone with Bradley Cooper from Nightmare Alley, which is a pick I'm not 100% confident in, because I think the movie can go one of two ways. Either Bradley Cooper gets nominated twice, both here and supporting actor, for Licorice Pizza and Paul Thomas Anderson's new movie, or I think he gets nominated in either or one or the other, or it's hard to tell where the support will go. Now in recent years with someone like Scarlett Johansson, we have seen an actor be nominated in multiple categories. And I expect both Nightmare Alley and Licorice Pizza to be well-liked, Best Picture nominees, maybe even Best Director nominees. So if the movies are so well-liked, we should like Bradley Cooper in it, but sometimes we see certain vote splitting, something like Amy Adams didn't get nominated for Arrival because she also, I think, had a lot of support for her performance in Nocturnal Animals, so it's a complicated kind of a situation. But right now I still have him in because what he's able to do in this movie, based on the film, based on the novel, he plays sort of like a steely-eyed, detective, and has a lot of the sort of tropes of going to a mystery world and, sort of having reality sort of bend and twist on him as he goes through it. The early word is positive from this movie, mostly positive, and I think that will sort of help Bradley Cooper. Of course, you also have, worries that he's maybe not the biggest in terms of a big speech or the sort of main central draw of the movie, in the same way like Peter Dinklage is the main draw of Cyrano de Bergerac and the main focus of it, because he's a little bit more of that sort of passive, not necessarily a passive character, but more of sort of a blank-faced sort of audience surrogate kind of a character. He doesn't necessarily have a whole lot to do, but how the sort of movie evolves from what I think will happen should be enough to get him that nomination. But I also think he will sort of just succeed based on the fact that he's well-liked and he's in a well-liked movie and gets in that fifth slot. But this is an incredibly competitive year for Best Actor, so there's also a lot of strong possible contenders. One that I want to mention is Joaquin Phoenix for Come On, Come On. This is from writer-director Mike Mills, who His last couple movies have done well in terms of the Oscars. He almost got a nomination for Annette Bening. That was a bit of a snub come Oscar night, but he almost got her a nomination. Of course, his movie before that was Beginners, which he gave Christopher Plummer his first supporting actor, his first Oscar win for Best Supporting Actor. So I think Joaquin Phoenix, it's only been 2 years since he won for Joker. And this is a wildly different, more of a sort of sweet kind of role versus the twisted role of Joker. I think will sort of show a different side to a lot of Academy members, and they'll want to reward him for that variance. But the truth is, the movie shouldn't be a huge Oscar contender. It's a sweet movie, it's a nice movie, but it's not necessarily the sort of serious, important movie that maybe A24 really wanted to be in terms of an Oscar player. So it could contend for best screenplay or something like that, but I really do think he could slip in just because he just won 2 years ago, and we've seen this multiple times with Roman J. Esquire, Israel Esquire with Denzel Washington. That got nominated just a couple years after he was nominated for Fences. Sam Rockwell gets nominated a couple years later after winning for 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri with Vice, literally just the year later, in sort of a surprise nomination. So they may just like Joaquin a lot, so they want to give it to him. And it is very much a leading kind of a role and a very different role from Joker. I'm just not sure about the movie and if it'll be seen enough to make that happen. And then my final honorable mention, possible contender I want to mention is Andrew Garfield from Tick, Tick, Boom. I think the studio Netflix is really positioning Garfield to have a big Oscar year. He was a big deal, coming out of The Social Network and then Spider-Man and then Hacksaw Ridge, and then he had sort of a great period there. But then in the most recent years, he sort of had made just a little bit stranger movies, Under the Silver Lake, movies like the Gia Coppola movie he did. So there's certain odd choices that he made. However, this year he's in The Eyes of Tammy Faye in a supporting role, which I don't think he's going to get nominated for, but voters will have seen that movie, so he'll be in the consciousness. He already has a Times profile. So there's sort of a momentum of making Andrew Garfield a thing happen. Of course, he's also playing Jonathan Larson, the creator of Rent, in what's sort of a semi-autobiographical biopic of his story and his life in a musical type style. It should be a very interesting movie. I haven't seen it yet. It's about to come out pretty soon. But I do think he is very much committed in this role from everything we know about it, and has sort of the campaigning things lined up right. So if Netflix really wants it, and Lin-Manuel Miranda is campaigning him, and look, he sings and he's complex and it's tragic, and that I think could really push him over the edge. So while Tick, Tick, Boom right now isn't necessarily the big Oscar contender that maybe we think it could be, I think Andrew Garfield could sort of sneak in. You also have someone like Leonardo DiCaprio from Don't Look Up, although I do think that's a little bit more of an ensemble piece. You have Adam Driver for House of Gucci. There's so many different options for this category. It's a really competitive year, like most years, but I think this is a particularly competitive one. So please let me know in the comments down below your predictions and what you think will sort of surprise come Oscar night. But that's about it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video, and until next time, stay tuned.